At my sister's wedding, I was seated next to the gift table, tucked behind a column, ignored like I barely existed. No one asked what I did. No one cared. Until the groom leaned toward a guest and whispered, "She's my investor." Suddenly, the whispers started, and the way people looked at me changed. "Hi, I'm Rachel." For most of my life, my family treated me like I was invisible, but I built something they never saw coming, and this wedding was the day it all came to light. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments, and if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. They sat me next to the gift table. Again, tucked behind a white column wrapped in tulle, directly under a ceiling fan that clicked every few seconds, and across from Cousin Evelyn, who still thought TikTok was a brand of chewing gum. The place card read, "Rachel Emery" in swooping gold calligraphy, like that somehow softened the message. "You're an afterthought." "You've never liked the spotlight?" Mom had said earlier as she handed me the card, all smiles and lavender perfume, as if that made it better, as if disappearing from the room was something I had asked for. The villa was beautiful, Charleston charm with just enough southern gloss. Outside, the sun glinted off the Ashley River, and servers in suspenders carried trays of sweet tea cocktails and shrimp and grits. Everyone looked like they belonged on the cover of a wedding magazine. Everyone but me. I arrived alone. No one asked why. No one even offered to walk me in. Jasmine had already texted, "I'm parking. Do not let them seat you near the speakers again." Too late. I replied with a photo of my view, a wrapped toaster oven and someone's wadded-up napkin on the floor. She sent back, "Want me to fake a cake allergy to cause a scene?" I didn't answer, just smirked at my phone and set it down. The ceremony had been quick. Madeline glowing like a catalog bride in lace and ivory. Dad teared up. Mom sniffled at just the right times. I clapped when I was supposed to, smiled when the photographer swept by. Then I took my seat and waited for the part where I could quietly leave. People passed by, their eyes sliding over me like I was furniture. A few nodded politely. One woman, someone's aunt maybe, stopped just long enough to ask, "And what is it that you do again?" I gave the same answer I always do at these things: consulting. That word was magic. It ended conversations faster than a car alarm. During cocktail hour, Nate looked over. He was across the patio laughing with a group of groomsmen, but when our eyes met, he paused, just for a second. His smile faltered, then returned like nothing had happened. I looked away first. At some point, a kid chasing a balloon brushed past and knocked my linen napkin to the floor. I bent down, picked it up myself. No one noticed. No one cared. I folded it neatly on my lap and took another sip of water. It had gone warm. The ring on my right hand caught the light, an old silver band worn at the edges. It had belonged to my grandfather. He used to call me the quiet one with teeth. Back then, I didn't understand what that meant. Now I do. Dinner came and went in a blur of toasts and laughter. Plates clinked, glasses rose. I listened as Madeline's name echoed over and over. A bright light, a future leader, a daughter we're so proud of. My name never came up. I cut my chicken with steady hands and kept my face still. Then Jasmine leaned in from 2 seats down. She didn't raise her voice, didn't smile, just whispered, "He's looking at you again," and not like someone staring at their fiancé's sister. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. The champagne flutes caught the light like tiny chandeliers. Each one clinked in celebration of a future that didn't include me. Guests laughed, shoulders grazing as they passed each other in choreographed clusters, drifting from one canapé station to the next. I stood at the edge of the garden, watching the string lights blink on one by one, like someone had flipped a switch labeled magic. I felt like a supporting actress in a film I didn't audition for. The part had been cast long ago, and I was never called back. I took my glass and wandered toward the stone bench near the back hedge. The roses were overgrown and fragrant, softening the air that otherwise smelled like bourbon glaze and overwatered lawn. I sat down slowly, smoothing my dress across my lap, careful not to spill the drink. I had learned to look polished no matter how out of place I felt. Behind me, a woman's voice said, "Can we ask her about the schedule? She looks like the planner." Her companion murmured in agreement before they wandered off. I didn't correct them. There didn't seem to be a point. The thing is, I've always been the one who fades to the edge. Even when I graduated college with honors, my party ended with Madeline performing a surprise dance routine in the living room. The cake was half eaten, and the guests were clapping along to a pop remix, while I sat in a folding chair still wearing my cap and gown. That was the night my dad patted me on the shoulder and said, "You're steady, Rach. That's a good thing. Not exciting, but good." Then he handed me a plastic fork and turned back to watch Madeline finish her spin. I sipped from my glass now, thinking about that word, steady. It wasn't praise. It was a placeholder. Something you say when you don't have anything better. Madeline floated through the cocktail hour in a shimmer of lace and blush pink. She laughed too loudly, touched too many shoulders. She performed, and people applauded because that's what you do when someone's wearing a dress that cost more than your monthly rent. Mom brushed by with a slice of pecan tart in one hand. She paused just long enough to adjust Madeline's veil, smoothing a wrinkle with motherly precision. Her eyes never landed on me. Nate appeared out of nowhere. His expression was unreadable, hands tucked into the pockets of his tailored navy suit. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Of course." He waited a beat longer, maybe expecting more. When I didn't offer it, he nodded back and turned away, melting into the crowd like he'd never been there. My phone buzzed in my palm, an email. I opened it and scanned quickly. Series C round confirmed. $14 million closed. All signatures in. One line at the bottom made me pause. "Congratulations, Rachel. You built something rare." I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. Around me, the wedding kept moving. People toasting with bourbon cocktails, music swelling with a jazz trio's rendition of "Stand By Me." No one noticed me. They never had. But suddenly, I noticed me. Silence had always been my armor. The fewer words I offered, the fewer targets they had. But now I wondered if it had become something else, too. A cage with walls I built so carefully, I forgot I was inside. Somewhere behind me, a voice cut through the low din. "She's not married? Surprising. She seems competent." I didn't turn around. I didn't flinch. I just pulled out my phone and texted Jasmine a single emoji. Ice. She wrote back immediately. Axe. "Her?" the man asked, his voice low but not nearly low enough. "She looks like she does taxes for a school district." I didn't look up. I didn't need to. I knew he was talking about me. People only say things like that when they're sure the person in question won't matter enough to notice. From my seat at the end of the reception tent, I could see everything and everyone. Madeline glowing at the head table, Mom whispering animatedly to the woman on her left, Dad toasting with a distant cousin like they'd just closed a real estate deal instead of married off their youngest daughter. The lights twinkled above in perfect Pinterest-worthy symmetry, and the scent of buttered rolls and rosemary chicken filled the air. I sat with a distant cousin, a bridesmaid's date, and someone's elderly aunt who kept mistaking me for hotel staff. The only person who hadn't ignored me all evening was the server refilling my water glass, and even he looked confused about why I was seated so far from the action. Nate stood near the bar, deep in conversation with a guest in a slim-cut blazer, and the posture of a man who'd already decided he was the smartest in the room. He leaned in, gesturing subtly toward the tent's edge, toward me. I didn't move, but my grip on the wine glass adjusted ever so slightly. "You should talk to my lead investor," Nate said. The man squinted. "That woman?" Nate didn't blink. "She's the reason this company has a boardroom at all." It landed like a dropped fork in a quiet dining room. Sudden, sharp, undeniable. I brought my wine glass to my lips, my fingers brushing against the cool silver of my grandfather's ring. I didn't smile, didn't straighten my shoulders or pretend to look surprised. I had spent years building a version of myself that didn't need approval. Tonight wasn't about arrival. It was about being seen by people who had never looked. Across the tent, Jasmine caught my eye. She tilted her head with a grin and mouthed one word: boom. People had begun to murmur, the kind of murmurs that build in waves. I heard fragments: wait, who is she? And investor. And that Rachel. Like my name was a question mark that had never deserved a period. Someone at a nearby table leaned toward a bridesmaid, whispering behind a manicured hand. My mother glanced over her shoulder, the confusion on her face barely hidden. She looked again, longer this time, and I saw it happen. The moment the gears turned, the threads began to knot. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I reached for the butter dish, spread a thin layer across my roll, and listened as the air around me changed. No spotlight, no speech, just recognition. And that was enough. Nate eventually drifted back toward the head table. Madeline stood to greet him, looping her arm through his and pressing her cheek to his shoulder. He nodded, kissed her temple. But his eyes weren't on her. They were on me. I adjusted my ring, finished my wine. And still, I didn't smile. Is it true? Madeline's voice came from behind me, quieter than usual, but not from humility. No, it was edged with something else. Disbelief, maybe even fear. I didn't turn around. I was standing near the back of the tent where the candlelight couldn't quite reach, just close enough to the exit to feel the early summer breeze pressing against the canopy flaps. The jazz trio played Georgia on My Mind, slow and syrupy, while inside the tent, the mood swirled with the kind of discomfort people pretend isn't happening. When I finally did look at her, Madeline looked smaller than she had all night. She had let go of her bouquet at some point, and without it, her hands didn't know where to rest. "Is it true?" she asked again. "About you and Nate. About the company." I raised an eyebrow. "Define about." She blinked. "That you're involved. That you invested. That you were behind all of it." I thought of how our mother used to say, "Let Rachel have her little projects. It's good for her self-esteem." As if ambition were a hobby. As if achievement were charity. Before I could answer, Mom and Dad appeared, flanking Madeline like backup dancers out of sync. Dad's face was flushed from the wine. Mom's necklace had shifted slightly to the left, as it always did when she got nervous. "Rachel," Mom said, reaching for a tone that could pass as warm, "why didn't you tell us?" I stared at her. "When have you ever asked?" Her smile faltered. Dad stepped forward, clearing his throat. "It just seems a little unfair, honestly, to keep something like that from family." I almost laughed. Unfair. "You've known about this?" Madeline asked Nate, who had quietly materialized behind them. He didn't say anything, but the way his eyes met mine said enough. He had known. He had protected it, just like I'd asked. And now he was watching to see what I would do next. "You just sat there," Madeline said, "letting us talk down to you, letting us think." I cut in gently. "You weren't talking to me. You were talking to who you thought I was." Silence. Not the polite kind. The raw, too honest kind that makes people shuffle in their shoes and glance at exits. Dad tried to redirect. "We're not here to argue. It's a happy day. No reason to dig up tension." I faced him fully then. "I'm not the one digging. You're just now realizing I was here all along." They didn't respond. Not really. I could see it happening. The shift. The scramble to revise the narrative. Maybe they were already rewriting it in their heads. How they always believed in me. How they were proud. How they helped in small, invisible ways. But I wasn't here for their edits. "You don't get to rewrite me," I said softly, "just because I've become someone you finally respect." No one moved. Even the jazz trio had slowed into silence. Nate remained still, his hands deep in his pockets, gaze steady, not interfering, just present. Mom's voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. I honestly didn't know who you were. I nodded once. That's the part that hurts. And it was. More than the condescension, more than the years of invisibility. It was knowing that they'd never been curious enough to even ask. The fire pit was nearly down to embers, flickering orange against the ash and stone. A half-empty wine glass rested on the brick ledge beside me. The music had faded hours ago, replaced by the occasional pop of wood and distant laughter from a handful of lingering guests who didn't yet want the night to end. I stayed behind because I wanted it to, not out of spite, just clarity. My heels were off, tucked under the bench. The hem of my dress had picked up flecks of mulch and a stubborn leaf I didn't bother removing. I was tired, but it wasn't the kind of tired that needed sleep. It was the kind that came from decades of swallowing small things until they built a weight too quiet to name. Hey. Her voice was softer than I'd heard all day. Madeline stood near the edge of the firelight, clutching her shawl like armor. She looked less like a bride now and more like the girl I used to share bunk beds and birthday cake with, the one who always took the bigger slice. "Can I sit?" I gestured to the spot beside me. She lowered herself slowly, like the ground might disappear if she moved too fast. For a while, we just sat there, staring at the glow. I could smell sugar and smoke and the last hint of gardenia from her hair. "You never even touched your cake," she said finally, nodding toward the dessert table in the distance. Most of it was gone now. Only a few collapsed layers and abandoned forks remained. "I was saving it," I said. Her eyes darted to mine. "You always did that. Remember birthdays? You'd wait until the very end, and by then I'd already eaten mine and yours. You were faster." She smiled, but it didn't last. "I used to tell you that you didn't care what people thought of you." "I didn't," I said, then paused. "Not people, just you." She blinked like I'd slapped her, but there was no anger in her face, just recognition. "I was afraid," she said, her voice catching. "Afraid that one day you'd become something I couldn't explain, so I ignored it. I pretended your world didn't matter because I didn't want to feel left behind." I didn't say anything right away. The flames crackled between us. "And now?" I asked. She looked at her hands. "Now I realize you were already ahead. I was just too busy being looked at to notice where I was going." I nodded slowly. "That happens." The silence between us wasn't heavy this time. It stretched and settled like something earned. Footsteps approached. Nate appeared from the shadows holding a paper plate and fork. "There's one slice left," he said, handing it to me. "Consider this ceremonial." The cake was neatly cut, the frosting smudged at one corner but intact. I took the plate, balanced it on my lap. I didn't eat it. "I think," I said quietly, "it tastes better when you're not the last to get it." Madeline let out a shaky breath. Nate didn't say anything. He just sat on the other side of the fire, hands clasped, eyes on the flames. My phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced down. A TEDx organizer's name popped up in the subject line. Jasmine's voice floated in from behind. "Stage wants you." I smiled, but not because I was proud or proven or powerful. I smiled because, for once, no one had taken the last slice. The valet gave me a small nod as he opened the car door. "Have a good evening, Miss Emery." There was something different in his voice this time, like he meant it. Like maybe now I wasn't just another name on a folded place card or a woman standing slightly out of frame. I handed him a folded tip and thanked him with a smile. He didn't rush to turn away. The air was cooler now, with a hush that only comes when the party is over, but the decorations haven't yet come down. Inside, the tent lights still glowed, dimmer now, flickering like they were finally allowed to rest. I could see shadows moving behind the linen walls, silhouettes cleaning up what the guests had left behind. I had packed my things earlier, slipped my flats on, and pulled my wrap tight over my shoulders. It wasn't the kind of dramatic exit people remember. It was quiet, intact. Nate stepped out from one of the side paths, holding a small envelope in his hand. "Thought you might want this," he said, offering it without ceremony. I took it without opening it. "Thank you." "You built something remarkable," he said. "Not just the company, the way you carried this, all of it." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some moments deserve silence more than applause. I nodded, and that was enough for both of us. Up on the villa's second-floor balcony, I saw Madeline and our mother standing together. Not close, not touching, but aligned. They weren't waving, weren't calling out, just watching. There was something in their stillness I hadn't seen before. Not regret, not warmth. Something closer to curiosity, maybe even awe. I met their gaze, not with a smile, but with a steady glance that said, "I'm not asking you to understand. I'm just letting you see." Then I stepped into the car. Jasmine sat in the passenger seat, sipping coffee from a paper cup and scrolling through Spotify. "Grits and glory, baby," she said, raising the cup in salute. "You want gospel, Nina Simone, or something that screams, unbothered millionaire?" I buckled in and leaned my head back. "Surprise me." We pulled away from the villa slowly, gravel crunching under the tires. I didn't look back. The next morning, Seattle was gray and forgiving, the kind of morning where the sky didn't insist on anything, just existed, quiet and wide. I walked into my apartment, kicked off my shoes, and set my clutch on the kitchen counter. The envelope from Nate was still in my hand. I opened it carefully and pulled out the note. 2 lines, neat handwriting. They don't have to understand it. Just don't let them rewrite it. I walked to my office and set the note beside a framed photo of my grandfather, the one person who had ever told me, without condition, "You'll lead something great one day." I opened my laptop. There it was, front page of the business section, the quiet architect behind a fintech empire. No mention of weddings, no family name, no drama. Just numbers, vision, results, the way I liked it. A new email blinked into view. The subject line read, TEDx Seattle Keynote Confirmation. I clicked Accept. Outside my window, the sun was finally starting to rise. As the sun rose over Seattle, I didn't feel victorious. I felt whole. Not because they finally saw me, but because I had stopped waiting for them to. Sometimes the loudest strength is the one that doesn't need applause. In families, we often assume we know each other, but the truth is, real connection only comes when we choose to ask, to listen, and to see beyond the roles we've assigned. If this story reminded you of someone you've underestimated or someone who quietly inspired you, feel free to share your thoughts. I'd love to hear what it stirred in your heart.